I'm delighted to be joined. First guest today, a legend, Russell Quirk, political commentator. I say, mate. Ian Collins just used a fantastic word to us in the handover. He doesn't seem to get the pulse of this country. When you put him this morning, so much so I had to ring Mike. I was in the car. I was like, what? Against Donald Trump yesterday. That's what we've got.
Well, what a contrast. Two contrasts. A contrast between Donald Trump and people are saying the best inauguration speech ever on the basis of righting the wrongs of the last 4 years of the Democrat wokeism. And then, yes, wooden Starmer this morning talking like a robot at us like this with regard to, I think, look, he's rather fake attempts to kind of feign concern over this. I don't think he seems particularly, or is particularly concerned.
I think there's a lot to be said for the fact that he's that Director of Public Prosecution's persona, excuse my French. Well, but let me play a couple of clips, Russ, for people maybe just tuning in who haven't heard them. This was Keir Starmer on why the Southport murders are a wake-up call. Before you play it, not we're going to do something about this particular case, we've made mistakes. This is what we'll learn for the future. Let's have a listen.
The tragedy of the Southport killings must be a line in the sand for Britain. We must make sure the names of those 3 young girls are not associated with the vile perpetrator, but instead with a fundamental change in how Britain protects its citizens and its children. In pursuit of that, we must, of course, ask and answer difficult questions, questions that should be far-reaching, unburdened by cultural or institutional sensitivities, and driven only by the pursuit of justice. That is what we owe the families.
So why wasn't it possible for our Prime Minister, newly in the job, before a lot of the mistakes that he's made and has made became apparent, why did he not, or was he not able to stand up in the aftermath of those horrific attacks when those 3 young girls were taken, murdered in cold blood by a man with, it seems, terrorist links? I mean, some of the information coming out about him, he bought a terrorist handbook, which you can now get from bestsellers. He bought a knife on Amazon. He'd been prevented. A father had stopped him from going to a former school the week before the attack. Why would the Prime Minister not have stood up a year ago, 6 months, and said, listen, this is a terror-related attack. I can't give any more, but can say what I can say. He didn't, but he did stand up and say when the riots took place, because people were making assumptions online, I'm not condoning that, he did say this is far-right extremism and sent the militia onto the streets to get all these people. So I never got that.
Yeah, so look, we all know and accept that there are certain rules around contempt of court. Sure. Of course, you know, you cannot, particularly those of us in the media, say certain things that are speculative that might prejudice the case by way of what a jury may hear and therefore think and decide. However, there is nothing stopping, and we've seen this many, many times in the past, nothing stopping the authorities telling us the facts. So the fact that, you know, ricin or an attempt to make ricin was found, the fact that this individual was in possession of an Al-Qaeda manual, you know, we can then, as an intelligent public, join the dots ourselves. The big problem here, of course, apart from the atrocities themselves, and of course how this monster was allowed to carry them out, having been reported not once, not twice, but 3 times to prevent, there is that, but it's the vacuum of information. Not just a vacuum of information in terms of what the government and the authorities decided not to tell us. Of course, then you get speculation.
Of course.
And people being concerned, off the back of lots and lots of other extremist activity, frankly, they start to become concerned about themselves. You know, is this something that's going to become more widespread?
And that's what
is this an Al-Qaeda play in terms of there's 50 of these monsters that are about to become active?
This is my thing about Starmer and the pulse and judging when you put him against Trump. Maybe there is a new threat to Britain. Maybe there's a lot of kids with screwed up brains who read Al-Qaeda manuals and think that they're going to change the world by going in and murdering young innocent girls or school children or whatever. But for me, this is a little bit too late. I don't understand. And please help me out. Phone the show, 0344 499 1000, text to 87222. Start your message as ever with the word talk. He talks about smashing the gangs. He talks about stopping the boats. I've always thought that he's reactive rather than proactive. I would have taken the bull by the horns and gone, this is an example of a terror situation, and one of the first things I'm going to do as Prime Minister is I'm going to get this dealt with. No, he's just a lawyer, isn't he? He's an uninspiring lawyer.
He is reactive, not proactive, but also he's just not authentic.
No,
when
he's
I
not.
listen to him talking about the issues in Britain, bear in mind he gets those issues the wrong way round. You know, the fact, as we've said, he characterises ordinary common sense protest as far-right thuggery. He is not convincing. I've said before, I do not think this man has empathy. He hasn't got empathy for people or for the country. I think he's in a process.
When I watched Donald Trump, and we did it on Drive, we'll go straight to the phones in a sec, I thought that man, like him or loathe him, and I've had all the lefties saying, oh, he's done this, he's been inappropriate. He genuinely loves his country, and he genuinely wants the people of that country to be safer, better off, and have an understanding of their standing as a country in the world. My Prime Minister, do I have to say that? I don't think he's proud to be British. Straight to the phone lines. Don't go anywhere. Steve's in Glasgow. Steve, Russell and I are here. What you got on this?
Good evening, gents. How are you?
Yeah, good. What you got?
Jeremy, I listened to Sir Keith on the radio with Mike this morning, just before I got out of my car, and it's brooding me all day. Who does he think he's talking to? He's talking more garbage and more lies. What was there to withhold? This was not a 50-50 case where we didn't know about the evidence. Everybody knew who'd done that. People witnessed it. It was a cut and dry case. I don't understand why he's coming out with this nonsense.
Well, I'll give you something that I talked about earlier in the office, and somebody said to me that's a bit conspiratorial. But, you know, on the day that Yvette Cooper today announces a public inquiry into the Southport attack, this government has refused an inquiry into the rape gangs who have created heinous carnage across this country for years. You could argue, could you not, Russell Quirk, that Keir Starmer, in saying nothing, gave himself political capital to say when people were causing trouble, that's far-right extremism, and be the man that he was. But that's using... listen, people will say I'm making that up. I don't know. But you can only say 7 months later you've told us what you should have told us at that moment, and a lot of what happened would not have happened.
I mentioned just now two sharp contrasts. That was going to be my second, the sharp contrast between... You know, he talked today a lot about, you know, getting justice and finding answers for the parents of the victims. Well, what about finding answers for the parents of the victims of those rape gangs, indeed? So there is an absolute hypocrisy there. But I would go further in terms of that speculation, and this isn't, again, conspiratorial. I'm afraid, look, we are dealing with politicians here and politicians' advisors. I tell you what I think is going on here insofar as the inquiries. He's rushed to want an inquiry on the Southport killings. I think we need to wait in terms of the terms of reference, which will be very, very important, because I think those terms of reference will guide whoever runs that inquiry in the places that the government want them to go to, but not to the places, i.e. what Keir Starmer perhaps knew in the aftermath and Yvette Cooper, not to go there. But the difference is, I think what Keir Starmer will do is try and pin the whole Southport issue on the failure of the security services under a Conservative government. That's politics point number one. The reason that the Labour Party don't want a probe into what's happening in terms of the or has happened and will continue to happen in terms of the grooming gangs is because, although that was under the Conservatives' watch, we all know that predominantly that was enabled by areas that are predominantly Labour controlled.
Completely
Labour councillors, Labour councillors. So what he's effectively saying is, I'm not going to probe anything that might actually dob in the Labour Party and destroy it based on their complicity, but if there's something I can score points with the Conservatives on, i.e. Southport, I'll do that. It's pure politics.
Steve, back to you very quickly. Did you... When you put, I was in the car this morning as well. I actually phoned Mike on his mobile and said I was listening to a man who to me is just dreary and uninspiring, and I based that just anyway. But of course, I was sat here when we played the whole of Donald Trump's inauguration speech. Whether you love or loathe Donald Trump, the difference is palpable, my friend, isn't it?
Night and day. But the problem is, Jeremy, this man is talking down to us all the time. Fine. So today, well, now he understands we are allowed to be angry about it. But 7 months ago, we were right folks.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Thank you so much. That was Steve in Glasgow. We'll go to Basingstoke. Matt on the phones already. Simon, you're on Talk Drive. Russell Quirk, who's with me. What you got?
Well, I just think that this whole issue of sub judice is a bit of a joke. Do you remember the 2017 Finsbury Park attack?
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing any hesitation in calling that A, a terrorist attack, and B, being it was undertaken by someone who was white. It was a far-right attack. I would have had far more respect for Keir Starmer if he'd have stood up today and said, the people in Prevent who made those 3 decisions that allowed this man to continue to walk the streets no longer have a job today.
Well, you see, for me, I'm like with you and with Russell, and I can't get out of my head. I thought about it all day. I can't get out of my head that it gave him political capital to say that's far-right extremism on the streets. This has been, created online, and I'm going to crush that. Whereas if you'd come out and you'd said to the British public, who, by the way, are far more engaged. I know people are hacked off with politicians, but I think the British people have got to a point, be it because of COVID, the cost of living crisis, immigration, where they know what they think and they have an opinion. And on stations like this, they're not afraid to say that anymore. Starmer, I think, is playing politics. I think Russell's right. But I think he's underestimating. Now, he was dragged out today. And as you quite rightly just said, he's done it 7 months later. Any person, I go back to Ian Collins's comment, any person with their finger on the political pulse would have done it at that moment because, as you said, Si, it's been done before. Simon's right, Russ, isn't he?
Yeah, and also, you play back that speech this morning, that very
not again.
very wooden scripted speech. There are a couple of other things that we should take note from it. First of all, he admitted, probably accidentally, that he was the one that drew a line under and corrected the failings of the CPS on rape gangs. Now, he said that to try and take the credit for fixing the wrongs of the past. But we should realise and remember that at that point he had been the Director of Public Prosecutions, the man in charge of the CPS for 4 years. So what is effectively admitted there, Jeremy, is that for 4 years he was a failed leader, allowing this ignorance, this sweeping under the carpet on his watch. The other very quick thing is listening to that speech, as he was kind of 5 minutes into it, he said something and began to say something that I think is very, very sinister indeed. He started to turn the speech into something that related to the censoring of social media. So if you listen to it very carefully, what he starts to say is, look, there's too much vile bile and nastiness online with social media. We need to do something about it. I suspect he is going to use the Southport murder situation and criminality and the conviction of this monster. I think he's going to use it as a catalyst to now say that we need to censor social media and social media platforms.
Simon, can I put the question to you? Do you think that, and some people will disagree with me for this, not bothered, do you think that he wasn't as open and as transparent as he was today, 7 months later at the time, because it then became obvious that he could jump on what he calls far-right extremism, hoover them up with police who suddenly appeared from nowhere in courts that were full and jails that were full, and get the whole thing done in 24 hours and show that he was the strong man? I think he politicised the Southport murders, absolutely.
He certainly did, but I would say this to Sir Keir Starmer and to our entire elite: you keep putting the pressure on the British people the way you're doing, and you will pay a price that you do not expect. I mean, in Basingstoke, there are 3 hotels full of migrants. My flat, I live in a block of flats that we have an area where we store, where we basically put our rubbish, which has a code to enter it. There is someone staying in there. And I've contacted the police and they will not come to see. So literally I have a migrant living in where I put my rubbish. That is how bad it is. And Basingstoke's a wealthy town. How long will people put up with this? And if they keep on trying to restrict our speech, they will literally cause the very situation they're trying to stop. And I strongly suspect that if they get out with their lives, they will be far more fortunate than they deserve.
I couldn't agree more. Simon in Basingstoke, thank you. Do please keep your calls coming. We'll get as many on as possible. That's the only 2 stories in town. The Southport murders, horrendous. I mean, horrendous. This Alex Ruda-Picana admitting yesterday before it went to trial, which, yes, I understand, means that the families don't have to go to the horror. They still have to live with the fact that these 3 young girls' lives were ended by a thug and a terrorist who had a terrorist manual that you can get. I mean, listen, it was listed on the websites of major booksellers, The Telegraph found. The text titled Military Studies in the Jihad Against Tyrants, the Al-Qaeda training manual, was published by a CIA psychiatrist in 2004 and serves as a tradecraft manual for terrorists. That was available. Hold on a second. He could buy a zombie knife on Amazon. Prevent the government's anti-terrorism body was told about him 3 times. They did nothing. This is like Sarah Sharif. This is like the social services being told about this poor girl and ignore it until she was beaten to death by her appalling piece of whatever that's her father. It's all well and good for Keir Starmer to stand up and say, Russ, and pontificate. This is what's happening, terrorism in this country. I think this could have happened a long, long time ago, but I'll tell you what Simon says more than any call I've had for months. They want to be very careful about the British people. When I say, and people like you say this, they go, oh, what are you doing, stirring up? No, no, I'm telling you the truth. People that you wouldn't believe, who have never said boo to a goose, are fed up to the back teeth of what's happening in this country. And somebody, somewhere, I believe, and I hope it is Nigel Farage, who'll be on this show in 45 minutes, are going to grab the consciousness of the British people like Donald J. Trump has done and lead this country out of this mess. I genuinely believe that.
Well, and yes, and look, how Starmer behaves is nothing short of tyrannical.
Yeah.
You know, it is...
and deaf. It's deaf.
You know, he will put ideology, party and votes before Britain. He's clearly doing that. And then if you question him, he censors you or puts you in prison. We've seen that before in the Soviet Union, in the run-up to what then became Nazi Germany in the 1930s. I mean, that might seem as if I'm exaggerating, but they are the ingredients. They are exactly the same things that were displayed
I can take that.
times.
I can take that the guy, okay, is a lawyer. And after the...
You say lawyer or...
Well, whatever.
Liar.
Yeah, a lying lawyer. I can accept all of that. And I can accept the people who would criticise Donald J. Trump, right? But what I am talking about is understanding the fervent anger that is everywhere across this country, not just Keir, by the way, the far right, as you like to label anybody who disagrees with your left-wing ideology. Every day, working men and women who are at the back of the bloody queue, behind immigrants, behind terrorists, behind... That man just said it. People work all their lives, and I think the British people are saying, we've had enough of being treated
He has
like this.
no idea of the real world,
no,
the real Britain, real people.
No.
He's never been surrounded by them. Obviously, he's a man that's been in the public sector pretty much all of his career, from what I can see. So he doesn't understand the public. I'm not sure he cares much about the public. I think that's been displayed left, right and centre. And all it will do, yes, is give rise to a platform for others, including Nigel Farage, that will just take advantage of the fact that Keir Starmer seems to be breaking Britain even more than the last lot did.